Peace. I just wanted to take a moment and just share my perspective on the Donald Sterling controversy. And I think that one thing that can be learned from this incident is how power relationships or power dynamics work or shouldn't work. A lot of people were confused. Some were shocked that Donald Sterling can make these statements about people of color when his own girlfriend is a person of color. You know, when the majority of the players on his basketball team are people of color, his head coach is a person of color, and as a real estate investor, he rents out to a lot of people of color. In terms of power relations, that is a very logical way that people in his position or seat of power think in terms of people who don't have that position or seat of power. In terms of his relationship, he was not with his girlfriend and he's not with her, or they're not together. She's with him. The players on his basketball team play for him on his team. He doesn't play for them. His head coach, Doc Rivers, is his coach. He pays Doc Rivers to coach. And in terms of being a real estate investor, these tenants who are people of color rent from him. So he is in the position and in the seat of power in terms of all of those type of dynamics. Now, the conversation he was having with his girlfriend was about her compromising or undermining his seat and position of power. So a lot of us can understand that, because as everyday people who may not have the type of money and influence that a Donald Sterling have, a lot of us speak in the same exact way. You know, you have people who make comments and statements about them Jehovah Witnesses. I ain't opened up my door. So some of us don't want to associate with Jehovah Witnesses, or we may be in relationships with people and we encourage them to, you know, don't mess with them Muslims or them Christians. Or they eating pork. No, I don't want you over there. Or a lot of us have the same type of concerns in terms of power relationships. And we interact in the same type of way where we don't want to associate with some people, or we disassociate with certain people for various different reasons outside of race. It may be because of religion. It may be because of sexuality. It may be because of age. It may be because of a lot of different things. But the only difference is you have this person who is in a position of influence and power, or a socioeconomic status where he can influence a lot more people because he has that type of mentality. It doesn't make it right, and it's still wrong for him to think that way, and it's also wrong for any of us who are everyday people to think that way too. And why? Because it's flawed thinking. It's flawed thinking because when it comes to the universe, everything vibrates, everything is in a constant state of motion. Being in a constant state of motion, you always have instances where forces act upon certain objects, where you have a constant shift of power as objects relate to one another. In other words, if you're in a relationship with somebody, there's going to come a time where you may not have control, or you may not be in a certain role or responsible for certain things, whereas that may shift where the other person may be in that position, because you have that type of transfer of energy or power in any kind of relationship. Some people who have a racist mentality, or who have a sexist mentality, who have a lot of ism mentalities, are under the impression that they're always going to maintain and be in control or be in that seat of power. Nothing in the universe does that. You always have a shift or a change in a distribution of power between objects, because you always have forces acting upon those objects as they relate to one another. Now, this is in terms of physics. So to have a mentality that you're always going to be in that position, you're always going to have the control, you're always going to have that seat of power, not only defies all laws of physics, but it defies the laws of probability. And anybody who has entered into any kind of relationship with that mentality over a period of time is shown that you cannot maintain that position over an extended period of time. There's gonna come a point where someone is gonna succeed you. You know, there's gonna come a point where even if you don't eat pork, You may be at a business meeting, or you may be at this particular environment where somebody may sit down and order pork chops, or they may eat pork. There may become other instances where you may work for somebody that happens to be a Muslim, or a person that may be a Christian or whatever. So what's going on, bro? How you doing, man? I'm good. So there may come instances where you may not have the control that you think that you have. And that is the nature of life, and that is the way in which the universe operates. So it's a flawed way of thinking to even believe that you're always going to have to maintain or be in control. There's going to be times where you're going to have to deal with life on life's terms. So that is a flaw in that thinking. It's not right or good for him to think that way, and it's not good for us as everyday people to think the same way as he is. Now, some of the solutions that I saw people speaking about in terms of how this incident should be addressed with Donald Sterling is that he should step down as an owner of the Clippers. Now, going back to speaking in terms of the way physics operates, dynamics of power change when it's acted upon by an outside or an inside force, which means Donald Sterling just stepping down saying I don't want to own the team anymore, it's not likely for something like that to happen. You're going to need force or social pressure or social economic pressure to actually change that type of dynamic and to shift that power. One of the things that I would suggest is the other team owners show some solidarity, unite with their sense of power, and disassociate themselves from him as an owner, and to show that united front, and to say that his type of thinking, his mentality, there's not a place for that professionally, and there's not a place for that in this league, and he needs to step down ownership. And you can also have the players collectively showing a united front to put social economic pressure on him to step down as an owner as well. Now, for him to just sit there and relinquish the ownership of the team, it's not likely that he'd do that. There needs to be force in terms of power to shift that dynamic. And it's the exact same way that it takes place in any kind of relationship that anybody would be in. If you have a person that is abusive and they're always striving to maintain control in that relationship, it's unlikely for them to just step down and say, I don't want to have control no more. You're going to have to force them to relinquish that control by having some type of support system or network to basically expose this person for who and what they are, and to diminish the power, undermine the power that they actually hold over that person in that relationship. So this was something that was inspiring, it was empowering, it was educating for those of you who want to just kind of get my perspective on what I see in terms of that controversy, and to also shed a little more light on, even though he has that mentality, a lot of us act the exact same way as everyday people. We may not have that money, and we may not have the same influence that he has, but it's wrong whether it's him or it's us. And as far as us really having some level of equilibrium or harmony in a society where there's an equal distribution of power between people, we can't hold a flawed way of thinking and a perspective like that and expect to have some sense of peace, harmony, as well as solidarity amongst human family members. Peace.